Mr. President, thank you for having me back in Istanbul. Again, this time it's always a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I've listened to a very interesting presentation before. I didn't bring any slides because I would much more like to have a dialogue with you on a lot of topics. So once in a while I put my glasses on because my arms have stopped growing and my eyes are going back in time. So EuPC, thank you for the introduction, Yavuz, on that one. EuPC is representing the plastic converting industry in Europe. In a few notes, we're about 50,000 companies. We have a joint turnover of around 300 billion euros and direct employment of around 1.6 million full-time equivalents. And if you look in our supply chain, that number is much higher. So we are an important industry. When I took over the managing director position in EuPC earlier this year, I wanted to have a dialogue with my former presidents and all stakeholders. What are our key objectives for the years to come? And we basically came back to three words: decarbonization, climate, and circularity. And these are the buzzwords which you will hear from me and certainly from others in our market for many years. Now looking a little bit, and we call it the Brussels arena, because sometimes we have not physical fights with the politicians, but we have quite a lot of dialogues with them, and we don't always agree on some views. If you look Europe from a geopolitical position, Europe has a lack of a lot of raw materials. And this became, and also the dependency of Europe on imports of certain critical materials has become very visible, not only with the energy discussion in recent years, but we also see more and more that if you look at from the plastic perspective, Europe has become a next importer of plastics and polymers. There is hardly any production left in Europe. This led, among others, for the politicians to come up with the Green Deal, which was already mentioned here today. For example, in the building and construction, looking at energy savings, we look at the renovation wave, so all buildings need to be insulated, all buildings need to be renewed. But also, there has been a law adopted not so long time ago to restore nature. And I think these go together. The bit boring part of it, with all of that, we get legislation, and more stringent legislation than we had so far. If you look at a trend, and we talked today about packaging and about the packaging directives or regulations, but there is much more plastic. And again today, we look a little bit at the single short life applications of plastic packaging, but there is also a lot of long life applications packaging, returnable packaging, crates, pallets, IBCs, you name them. So there's a lot of more than just single-use packaging which we need to look at. The trend in Europe is that more and more legal proposals are being proposed as a regulation. In a few words, the difference between a directive and a regulation is member states in Europe with a directive can put on their own targets. It's a minimum. A regulation is harmonized in all European countries and is valid roughly after 1 month after publication. So regulation is much more stringent. Countries like mine, I'm from the Netherlands, don't necessarily like the proposals made in the regulation today, because my country is ahead of that. And of course, a regulation is a compromise of, let's say, the average for the European Union. Nevertheless, I would say, let's count on the fact that there will be a packaging and packaging waste regulation in the months to come. Next to that, there is a construction product regulation. Next to that, there is an end-of-life vehicle regulation. Next to that, there is an eco-design sustainable product regulation. Next to that, we discuss the single-use plastic directive. We discuss REACH. We discuss waste shipment regulations. We discuss the port reception facility regulations. I can continue this list. Plastic has a lot of attention, and the files are only growing. I agree to the former speakers that design, of course, is a very critical one. Whatever you design correctly makes it much more easy to recycle. Where do we see the main challenges? One of the discussions we have is with the GSC, the Joint Research Center, which is part of the European Commission. When does waste ends to be waste and becomes raw material again? This is a very critical process because it has to do with the permissions you need in your facilities. If we look at all the other legislation, and all of them mentioned, there are a few topics, very big markets, which are still not really mentioned. I think about toys, textile, agri, so agriculture markets, sport, leisure, electronics. All of them will get similar legislation. All of them at a certain moment of time, and I guarantee you that certain moment of time is in the next 5 years, will have proposals for mandatory recycled content. All of these markets will have to step up and will come up with extended producer responsibility schemes which are fit for purpose. And having said that, one of our biggest concerns when we were asked our opinion on the proposals of the European Commission, as, for example, on the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive with 35% recycled content for certain products, should we fight this? Should we embrace this? And in the end we said, but there's nothing wrong with that legislation per se. The only thing where we have our challenges is, of course, how do we get access to those high-quality recyclates we need, which are safe enough to put in the products which we, as converters, bring to our customers and to the market. So let's discuss with you, authorities, how to do it, not if to do it. Because if we all believe in a changing world where, let's say, climate change is imminent, circular economy means 100% recycled. So 35% in that sense is just one step in a direction. We also try to convince, and Yavuz, thank you for introduction. Yes, I have a very long background in plastic recycling as well. When I finished school and I started to work in a plastic recycling company, with a master degree, I told nobody that I was working for a recycler because that was not done. Today, the red carpets are out because the recyclers are the new kings of the world. But that took 35 years. We have done a lot of work. And Marcus, you did a great presentation. Probably I was one responsible for this 95% target traceability for the PET bottles and for other materials, because at that time we needed full security. We could not allow, and that's still valid today in my view, we cannot allow any risk with food. Circularity means waste management. Circularity means other waste management, because the waste management of today in most countries is very linear. A lot of material stands up in landfill. A lot of material is being incinerated. A lot of material simply is not available for the converting industry. And the present capacities are not sufficient to live up to the 35% already in the European Union. The quality of collection and the quality of sorting of waste is going to be top priority in the years to come. For that, we need top-level equipment, and fortunately, most of them are available. We just have to install them, and we have to build the infrastructure to deal with it. You've probably also heard, and the word was mentioned before, plastic has an issue with the pollution. But is it really the plastic, or is it us, human beings, with the way we treat our waste streams? If you clean your house properly and you take it to a truck, and the truck brings it to a landfill, and the landfill then starts leaking in the environment, is it then the material, or is it our waste management systems? I would vote for the waste management system. I had discussions in recent days also again with the United Nations. As you know, there is a discussion about a global treaty on plastics. And they said, yeah, we're going to ban this and we're going to ban that. I said, if you really want to help the planet, stop landfilling. Bring the material from landfilling, preferably into recycling. If you can't do recycling, then incinerate it on a high level, but stop landfilling, because landfilling is leaking in the environments on a daily basis. It's not only the consumer losing a PET bottle or a bag on the streets. It is our waste management systems which are not up to date. In July, I was here and we discussed about a system called Operation Clean Sweep. This is something as a converting industry we can do. We can talk to our logistics, so we can also do our own homework. We have to stop the leakage in the environment, and where possible, take it out. What we also need to do is add value to waste. If people think waste is useless, they continue to throw it away. If we manage, as a converting industry, to add the value to waste and bring it back as high quality raw material, I think we have a gain. And then plastic will not be demonized, plastic will probably be the material for the future. Coming back to that, we need very high quality recyclates, constant quality. I think the good news is most technologies are there to cope with at least 80 or 90% of the challenges ahead. What is not so much known is that around 65% of today's mechanical recycling capacity in Europe is owned by converting companies. A lot of converters have integrated recycling activities. And my guess is that this percentage will only grow. In recent weeks and months, we also see that the chemical industry is buying recycling companies and integrating recycling companies into their world. And the other ones who are doing that are the waste management companies. So we see a shift in this market. And frankly, I think it's a good shift. Sometimes recyclers, how good they are and how hard they have worked, are simply too small to scale up with all the uncertainties of prices and availability of materials. If you look at the food contact discussion, without going into details, I took this file to Brussels in 1998 because I already saw it then when I was still as a president of the Plastic Recyclers Association at that time, but also as a converter with integrated recycling facilities and running the first bottle-to-bottle PET factory in Europe. We saw the necessity of clear regulation, and we are very pleased. Although they're very slow, EFSA went along, and we have, I think, a very good barrier. And if I would compare it with FDA, let's have ESPA. Yeah, with all their shortages, and yes, the processes are long, but at least we know it's sure and safe. Will mechanical recycling be able to do everything? No. No. There are challenges also with, and there are boundaries where mechanical recycling will stop. Can it do much more today can it do more tomorrow than today? Yes, no discussion. Mechanical recycling can and will grow, and is also from the converter side the preferred technology in the market. Yet there are difficult to recycle materials, so we also need new technologies. There's a heavy debate at the moment on the status of chemical recycling, but that debate is not so new. For those who look a little bit in the EU legislation and at the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive in 2008, may remember there's a very strange percentage, 22.5%. I was in the negotiation team at that time. 20% for mechanical recycling, 2.5% for chemical recycling. Already in 2008, there was a discussion about the introduction of chemical recycling. Unfortunately, it never was really materialized on the chemical recycling side, so the mechanical side grew. We see today, for example, in Germany, again, a discussion about two targets. One target for mechanical recycled, one target for chemically recycled material. So where would it have an advantage? If we don't change the way we collect waste, and we cannot come to this 95% traceability of food grade, chemical recycling may offer solutions, for example, in flexible polyolefins for food, which in that case is completely difficult to reach with mechanical recycling. However, if we manage to change our way of collection and maybe some design rules, we might even get there with mechanical recycling. I've been involved in 4 EFSA-approved polyolefin recycling facilities in Europe. They are there for returnable packaging, not for single-use packaging. It means that the threshold of migration and all the laws have been done. And we have, of course, also covered the traceability of 95%. With commingled collection, that will not work. So even putting all plastics in one bag is not a solution. You might have to do a step ahead. I heard former speakers talking about the deposit return systems for bottles or cans. Maybe that could also go for shampoo bottles. Maybe that could also go for batteries. Maybe that could also be for other materials. Let's have an open discussion and dialogue on what do we need to do as waste management systems in order to make the material suitable for circularity. Then another one, LCAs. If we look as an industry, where I think we have a lot to do, is not only to tell how good we are, but also prove how good we are. If you look at the LCAs of most plastic products, we outfavor alternative materials. Yet we are the ones always under pressure. In the recent 2-3 weeks, time flies, I think about 2-3 weeks ago, an interesting report came out in Brussels, out of the sky. It was initiated by 2 NGOs which are not, let's say, natural friends of the plastic industry. The report came out on paper, and the greenwashing of the paper industry by telling that they are a more sustainable solution to replace plastic in packaging. It's an interesting view. I welcome you. EuPCG has got a copy for me. Read it. It doesn't make plastic to be great again at that time, but it also puts things in balance. Paper, how good it is, and with all the qualities it has, also has a downside. This downside is known for plastic. This downside is not known for paper. So have a look at it, please, and make up your own judgment. But we need from the plastic industry to work a lot more on our LCAs. Also, when you use recycled, and Marco, thank you for also putting that in your slide, we know that when we use recycled material to replace virgin material, we save CO2 emission, considerable amounts of CO2 emission. Some of you who have been here in July, they know. I was already born below sea level. So climate change has a special attention in my country. Yeah, I live -3 meters, just to make it clear, and I would like to be at -10 meters in the years to come. So melting icebergs are a big concern. I'm also living in the delta area of big rivers, so we see all the trouble coming from all sides. We also have a discussion and a dialogue on, for example, reports from Ellen MacArthur Foundation on the toxic-free circular economy. Nothing wrong with that consideration, but how do you define toxic-free, and what is toxic to, non-toxic today may be considered toxic tomorrow? So is this the right approach? Or do you kill with these kind of phrases, circular economy and circularity, which is technically very viable? A few last words. Whatever choices which are made on systems, we need better certification, we need more transparency. So EuPC has been the founding father of a system called Polycert, because we need harmonized certification throughout Europe. We also need better control of data. So we launched a project called MORE. And to come back on Polycert, you don't know yet Jamur, but in the next few days, hopefully you will be formally approved by Polycert as for Cetiloop. So also in Turkey, you can work with this scheme. We also need to change a little bit our way of communication. But for me, the key, and I already had some discussion earlier this morning when I came in, we need value chain cooperation, much more than ever before. We need the brand owners and the retailers to sit together with us to think, how can we implement all those nice percentages? How can we do it? What is their role? What is our role? What kind of equipment do we need to do that? And how can we get materials which we can keep as long as possible in a closed or controlled material loop? With that, I thank you, and if there are questions, we'll certainly be happy to take them afterwards. Thank you very much.